Sorry, Claire, we can't hear you.
Oh my gosh, here we go. Thank you, Madhu. Sorry, like Natalie said, I'm Claire Mercer. I'm an OT here at CPTWC, and I also work with children at CTCA. I am super excited to be doing this presentation about emotional regulation. It's something that I am super passionate about. It's something that we all spend our entire lives working on for ourselves too. So it's something that is very, very important and something that can be super, super challenging, especially for our kids that need a little bit of extra support. So I'm hoping that out of this presentation, you guys get some strategies and supports to help both you and your children with their emotional regulation. You guys can see my presentation? Amazing. All right, here we go. All right, we're going to start with some objectives. The objectives of this presentation are to understand the different types of regulation, components that make up regulation, and a typical age progression of emotional regulation skills. We're going to identify different strategies to help support your child's big feelings in the moment. I'm going to use the phrase big feelings a lot because that's a lot of times what we use with our kids if they're having big emotions. We're going to identify some strategies to support you guys as the parent or caregiver in the moment, because a lot of times we need some supports for ourselves too, and I don't want to forget that. We're going to learn the very basics of one of the regulation curriculums that's really, really popular here and we use frequently with our kids, and then answer any questions that you may have. And again, Natalie says, if you want to make sure that you remember a question, pop it in the chat and we'll get to it later. All right, here's our foundations. There are a few different types of regulation. I put stars next to the ones that we're mainly going to be focusing on today. That's sensory regulation and emotional regulation, but I also do want to touch on cognitive regulation. So cognitive regulation, we'll start from the bottom and go up. Cognitive regulation is our ability to use problem solving and our attention to persist through a variety of tasks and goals. We have a goal, we have an idea, we use our skills, we use our problem solving abilities to work towards that goal and solve it. We're not going to be talking about that much today. We're going to talk about the top two. Emotional regulation is our ability to respond to different situations in a socially appropriate way or in a way that aligns with the situation. So our ability to have something happen to us or feel something and respond to that way in a way that is safe, a way that is appropriate, and a way that is more or less like expected to the situation. So kind of having a response that matches the experience that we're having. A lot of times our kiddos will have an experience and they will have a really, 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 really huge reaction to something that might feel or seem really, really small to us. And our job is to kind of help them cope, have these strategies to have a reaction that feels a little bit safer and a little bit more appropriate for the situation. And then sensory regulation is something that is also super important to think of in terms when we're thinking about emotional regulation, and that's our ability to modulate our responses to sensory stimuli in the environment in order to stay regulated. If the environment is loud, if it's busy, if there's a weird smell, how can I use my skills and my regulation skills to help myself still stay regulated in that situation, despite all the different stimuli that are coming around? Okay, what impacts emotional regulation? There are a lot of different things that are at play that are impacting emotional regulation. These are just a few, but these are the ones that I felt to be the most important for us to think about. The first one is physiological processes. Think about yourself. I'll think about myself. I'll speak for myself. If I get 3 hours of sleep at night, I don't have my coffee in the morning, and my supervisor surprises me with like a stressful deadline, or all of a sudden something really unexpected happens at work, my emotional regulation is not going to be too great. I'm tired. I'm not alert. Maybe I also skipped breakfast, so I'm hangry. I'm not going to be able to respond to those emotional moments in a way that is probably the most appropriate. So we need to make sure that physiological processes are taken care of. Similarly, sensory processing, if someone's blasting music in my ear and my least favorite smell is right next to me, I'm also probably going to have a hard time balancing my emotional reaction. So if my sensory system and my physiological systems are not regulated, it's going to be a lot more challenging for me to access those higher level cognitive and emotional regulation skills. Does that make sense? Cool. Another thing is the environment. What's going on in the environment? Similarly, there's different sensory stimuli. The room might be really busy. We might be in a place that we don't like. There might be some unexpected changes happening in the environment. In terms of environment, I also like to think about routine. Like, was our routine disrupted? Are we around different people than we typically are around? I see a lot of kids who have meltdowns only at school or only at home or only when they come to the clinic. And it's because of that environment where they have different coping strategies and different ways to regulate themselves depending on the environment that they're in. So we also want to think about physically where the child is, who's around them, what's happening around them. These meltdowns or tantrums aren't going to happen in a vacuum. There's things that impact them. And then the responses of others. The way that we respond or other people respond to a child's big feelings really, really impacts their emotional regulation. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later in strategies, but thinking about how, and you think about it for yourself too, if you're having a really bad day or you're really sad, the way someone talks to you or responds to you and your feelings is going to impact the way that you continue to feel. Similarly, language and communication. The way we speak and communicate with our kiddos, especially in moments of distress, it means a lot. It holds a lot of weight. Similarly, silence also means a lot and can hold a lot of weight. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit more too. This is a visual that I really like to use. It's called the pyramid of learning. And you'll see at the very bottom, there's the central nervous system, and there's our sensory system. So our tactile system, vestibular system, the central nervous system being able to control all of our like bodily functions. And then as you move up, there's some more complex skills. There's our ability to motor plan, our ability to know where our body is in space, hand-eye coordination. We work towards the top. We're getting into auditory skills, language skills. You get to the higher part of it, and then you have behavior, academic learning. Where the red arrow is, that's kind of about where emotional regulation skills come in. So you see beneath that, we need to have all of those things underneath in place before we can access those higher level emotional regulation skills. So going back to what I said before, if I'm hangry, if I haven't slept, if I am super, super dysregulated by some sensory stimuli, I'm going to have a way harder time getting to the top of the pyramid. And you think about that, you know, for our kids that are 3, 4, 5 years old, this is going to be a lot more challenging because they're still learning how to access these skills. And so they might need a little bit more of our support to climb to the top of that pyramid, especially when they're in a heightened state of emotion. Okay, little bit of a brief overview on some typical emotional regulation developmental milestones. In infancy, hello? Oh, okay, sorry, I thought someone had something to say. In infancy, we know babies cry to meet their needs. They cry when they're hungry, they cry when they're tired, they cry when they need a diaper change, they cry when they're sad, they cry, and that's how they know to meet their needs. But they also have some mechanisms of self-soothing, whether it's sucking on a pacifier, sucking on their hands, co-regulation with a parent holding them, snuggling them, rocking them. That's typically where infants are on the scale of emotional regulation. Once we get into the toddler years, co-regulation becomes more of a thing. Our kiddos are actively seeking out parents or loved ones, caregivers, to provide them with that emotional regulation. If they hurt themselves, they're going to come to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, babysitter, to get that sense of safety, comfort, and regulation. They're also going to be experiencing a bigger range of emotions. They're going to be experiencing fear. They're going to be experiencing worry. They're going to be experiencing surprise. All of these more complex emotions are going to start to develop. They're also going to be able to recognize a wider variety of emotions. So that's when our kids in preschool start, looking at the little smiley faces to show happy or the sad face to show sad. They're going to be probably labeling that a lot more with themselves, with their friends, in books, in movies, all of those different things. That's when kind of that recognition typically begins. They also start to show the beginning development of different strategies to manage challenging emotions, whether that is lying down and taking a break, or some of our kids suck their thumbs. That's one of their strategies. Again, that co-regulation, seeking out safety and care from a parent or a caregiver. Toddlers will begin to do that at this time too. And then in childhood, sort of about like that kindergarten age, our kids will start to identify appropriate versus inappropriate expressions of emotion. So safe ways to express emotion, ways to express emotion that like quote unquote make sense depending on the situation. If I scrape my leg, I cry. If my friend takes my toy, I might get mad. If I am having a great time on the swing, I'm going to be happy, I'm going to smile, I'm going to giggle. They're still learning in the process of how to express and name and identify these emotions, but they're starting to expand on their ability to express these emotions in a variety of ways. I also want to talk about the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. A tantrum, I feel like we all probably have experienced a tantrum before. I feel like I have my own tantrums in my own way. It's goal-oriented and attention is a factor. A tantrum is that we want something. Maybe it's not time for that. And so we have a tantrum because we want to get what we want. And tantrums almost always happen in front of someone else because we want to get that thing that we can't have right now. We want the attention for it. We want to be able to gain access to what we can't have. Therefore, we're having a tantrum. A meltdown is very different. A meltdown is where a child is maybe overstimulated. They're in a fight or flight response situation. Their nervous system is working overtime way up here. They lose their ability to use language in an effective manner, and their higher level functions, like at the top of that pyramid, like I showed you, those are kind of turned off, and attention is not a factor. We'd be having this meltdown whether we were in a room by ourselves, whether we were in a room with 100 people. Our body is just out of control. And those are the kinds of situations where I want to hone in on today. All right, well, let's get into some strategies. First, I want to talk about some in-the-moment strategies that can be beneficial for the child, how to help the child in that moment. First, I want you to assess, is this a tantrum or a meltdown? Typically, those are pretty simple to tease apart. Is my child upset because they wanted candy and we said it's not time for candy and now they're screaming? Or are they upset because it just happened and out of the blue and you can't identify what's going on? Is the environment overstimulating? Do you feel like they're kind of losing their ability to communicate? That's going to be more of your meltdown, that the child probably needs a little more support. With a tantrum, that's where kind of more boundary setting and following through with sort of like, nope, first we need to do this, then we'll do this. That's where that kind of strategy comes in. With a meltdown, we're going to use some of these below strategies. So with the pyramid of learning, we want to make sure that, first of all, physiological and sensory needs are met. We want to make sure that the child is not seeking out something to eat. If they're not thirsty, make sure that their temperature is okay. Sometimes kids will get overheated and that will lead to a meltdown. making sure that those sensory needs and those physiological needs are met first is the utmost priority. You also will want to decrease language use. I know a lot of times, and I do this myself too, a child is very upset. We want to try to talk them down from it. Not going to work. The more language we use in these situations, the more dysregulation is going to happen. So we want to decrease our language use. Sometimes silence is best, giving the child a quiet moment to just their feelings and sit with their feelings. If we do need to say something, keeping it short, keeping it concise, no room to misconstrue anything, just very simple language like you are safe, I hear you, I understand you, you are upset. Very simple things like that can be very helpful in the moment. Then we also want to label emotions. And so that works with language use. Labeling emotions, like you can label them. I typically label them in the first person. So like, I feel mad. I feel upset right now. I'm sad. I'm scared. Sometimes we can provide choices. If your child is feeling really out of control, they might not be able to access the decision-making skills that they typically would. So offering a choice of, do you want to take a break on the couch, or do you want to take some deep breaths with me? Offering them choices and opportunities for some control in a situation where they feel out of control can start to help bring them down a little bit. Of course, we want to have safety be a top priority as well. If they're in a really heightened state where they're being unsafe with their body, they have access to things to throw, tip over, kick. We want to make sure to remove them from that space so that they're safe. We also want to prioritize validation. The feelings that your child are having in this moment are real. They might be frustrating, they might be confusing, we might not know why, but we need to have them understand that we get it. They're valid. We understand that they're having big feelings. We never want to say something like, oh, you're okay. Because in that moment, they're not okay. And in their body, they do not feel okay. So giving them that validation that this is hard, you're safe, we're going to get through this. I know that you're feeling upset. Again, those simple, short phrases will be really helpful. Overall, time and space. A meltdown is something that will pass, but if we try to make it stop, it's not going to stop. We don't have much control over making a meltdown stop like the way we would in a tantrum. And I saw, Madhu, you put something in the chat about differentiating between tantrum and meltdown. So a tantrum is something that you can pretty clearly identify why we're upset. So let's say that it's raining outside, but your child really wants to go outside. And you say, we can't go outside, it's raining right now. Child immediately becomes dysregulated, screaming, wants to go outside, kind of won't stop until either they're done with their big feelings and you kind of have to let the storm pass, or you provide them with what you want or what they want, excuse me. So it's very, very goal oriented. It's, I can't have this, I want this, so I'm upset. Whereas a meltdown are those times when it's kind of, the emotions feel a lot more maybe confusing or unexpected because the child is maybe more overstimulated. There's not a clear, I didn't get this and now I'm feeling upset. It's not attention maintained. So even if, you know, your child was alone, they would still be having these big feelings. They're not trying to access something. That's a little bit more of what I'm talking about in terms of a meltdown. Does that make sense? I don't know if Madhu's still there. I can't see.
She shook her head.
You did? Okay, sorry. Your
Yes.
little box was
Yeah.
like hidden from me. Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. So my main confusion has always been in terms of like, identifying what a tantrum versus a meltdown is, and where I should like hold my boundary. Like, for example, like, if I say something like, go take a shower, and then there's this huge, like kind of defiance that starts saying, that follows in terms of like, oh, I don't want to take a shower, I'm going to run around, I'm going to play with my toys. So this is clearly a tantrum and not like a meltdown.
Yes.
But like, for example, if they are in, for example, like they go to like a supermarket and it's very overstimulating for them, and then they're just running around everywhere without any kind of like an objective or a goal, that can be considered as like a meltdown. Am I going in the right direction?
Yes, I think you're spot on. And I also think that, meltdowns can look really, really different for different children. Obviously, so can tantrums, but meltdowns can look like more of that sensory dysregulation, which sounds like what you're describing. Like we are just losing control of our body and we are just all over the place. We're not really able to communicate. We're not really able to respond in the way that you typically would in more of a meltdown, or in more of a tantrum, excuse me. Meltdowns can look like kicking, screaming, throwing things, hitting. Meltdowns can look like just total loss of control in a variety of ways. And so every kid's going to be different in the way that they show meltdowns. But yes, I think that you're spot on in that tantrum is, I want this, I can't have it. There's a boundary. There's a lot of times rules. It's a little bit more cut and dry, whereas that meltdown is kind of this overflow of emotions and dysregulation.
Could it start as a
Got it. That's very helpful.
Yes, and Natalie just said to me, like, can something start as a tantrum and turn into a meltdown? Totally. All right. Next one. Okay. Oh, and then the last part of in the moment is you need to regulate yourself. That is, I think I see people laughing. That is I feel like number one hardest part for parents, therapists, grown-ups in general, is we need to stay regulated during these moments. It is so hard. But here are some tips. This sounds like a total no-brainer, but you gotta breathe. Even if you need to just like close your eyes for a moment, pretend you're completely somewhere else, take 3 to 5 deep breaths. It makes such a difference. It helps so much. I do it probably every single day, many times a day. It grounds you. It brings, like, physiologically, it brings oxygen to your body. It helps you calm down. It helps keep you in the moment, and it truly is relaxing. So even if there is a situation where things are just happening through the roof and you need to remove yourself mentally for two seconds just to take a deep breath, it really does make a huge difference. And it's a skill that we teach to our kids too, is taking deep breaths. I'm sure if any of your kids are in OT or social work, or honestly, most services here, we pretty much use that across the board. Taking a deep breath works wonders. So that would be my first suggestion, is just start with a deep breath. You see those signs of your child going into a meltdown or a tantrum, just fill your entire body with air, and then make sure that you're able to approach the situation in the most regulated way as possible. Time and space is something I recommended to give the child. Time and space is also something helpful for you. If there are 2 parents or 2 caregivers present, if you are able to tap out for a minute and swap with your partner, with another adult that is in the situation, that's okay. That is totally okay to just take a minute, step out, regroup, make sure that you feel safe, make sure that you're regulated, take those deep breaths, cry if you need to, do whatever you need to do to kind of regroup and get yourself back into a more regulated state. If you're able to tap out, that's fantastic. If you're not, provide yourself some physical space, you know, across the room, as long as the child is able to be safe too. If they're engaging in unsafe behaviors, of course, that would not be appropriate to tap out, because they need to be monitored. But being able to give yourself some time and space on your own is totally fine. I think a lot of people think that they need to like see it through and be able to like be there from start to finish, but it's okay. If you need to take time, that's all right. I would always recommend that you return to the situation when you can, so that you're able to repair and kind of, you know, sit with your child, take a deep breath, process what happened, so that you're not completely leaving the situation, because then that can make your child feel like that you will step away from them anytime they're feeling upset. So always regroup, come back, make sure that you're regulated. I also think that modeling your own self-regulation strategies can be great. So like I said, deep breathing, we start deep breathing, sometimes the child will start deep breathing. If you need to start counting to yourself, that's another one, counting to 10. That's a great time to model that. And it also helps us stay grounded as adults. And it also teaches the child their own self-regulation strategies too in that moment. Other self-regulation strategies like naming your feelings, squeezing your hands together, giving yourself a big hug, closing your eyes. Any like appropriate self-regulation strategies that you use for yourself, use them. Ground yourself, help yourself stay in a state where you're safe, comfortable, and regulated. I alluded to this before, but don't feel like you need to stop the meltdown, because it won't work. So if you go into a meltdown thinking like, all right, I'm going to put a stop to this, you're going to be fighting a losing battle. And so kind of getting that out of your mind is honestly kind of freeing, for me at least, when I'm like, okay, we're having a meltdown. I can't make this stop right now. However, that helps me know that I'm not like fighting against a child's feelings. I'm just here. My role in this is not to stop it. It's to sit with you, to be with you, keep you safe, process through this. It always ends. It's always going to end. But our job is to help cope and to help regulate and help see how we can support the child in that moment versus putting an end to it. And then the last thing is give yourself some grace. Meltdowns are going to happen. It's okay. It's going to pass. I think a lot of people think that it's like a reflection that they did something or that something happened. A lot of times they just happen. There's overstimulation that you can't control. There are physiological feelings inside our children that is making them so uncomfortable that their body just needs to lose control. And that's okay. Just remind yourself that you're doing awesome. You're doing a great job, and use your strategies, and it will pass. I also wanted to touch on some maintenance strategies and things that you can just do throughout the day when you and your child are together and there's not a meltdown happening. A lot of times you're not going to get much done if you try to practice these strategies when there's a meltdown, because again, we're not able to access those higher level learning areas of our brain. But use like routine use of regulation strategies, even in like smaller emotions. So just like practicing deep breaths regularly, incorporating that throughout the day. Kids love yoga these days. So like if anyone has done yoga with their kids, that's a great way to practice deep breathing and just getting some movement in. Being able to just incorporate calm activities throughout the day just to get sort of a baseline of regulation can help a lot. Prep your child for potentially triggering situations. If there's going to be like a change in routine, change in plan, just try to use either a social story or talk to them about the change so that they're anticipating it and they're able to prepare for that. You can role play also, like if a child is, like going to the dentist for the first time and that's going to be potentially triggering, role play it. Use their stuffies, use their dolls, pretend to be the dentist, or they can be the dentist and pretend to give you a tooth cleaning, stuff like that in order to prepare them. Again, always make sure those physiological needs are met, just to prevent anything from potentially triggering from a physiological standpoint. A lot of people like to have, we have these in the classrooms and throughout the clinic and academy, like calm down corners, really just like a cozy spot in your house where it's safe. And there's maybe like pillows, blankets, just cozy things where your child can go when they want to have a calm moment. And they know that that's like a safe spot for them to go when they are feeling big feelings. And then always make sure to repair after a meltdown. Like I mentioned before, you know, everyone's emotions are really heightened during a meltdown, making sure that you and your child come together after the meltdown to be able to repair, have a moment of calm together, do something really preferred, just have like some nice quality time to make sure that we're not having a big association between like my time with mom or dad or babysitter, or grandma and grandpa is spent in meltdown. All right. I want to make sure that we have like plenty of time for questions. I'm going to really quickly go through the zones of regulation. This is probably something that might look familiar to a few of you. But this is a curriculum that we really like to use with our kiddos. Typically more school age kiddos, but a lot of our preschool age kiddos like this as well. There are ways that you can adapt it to make it a little bit more simple for younger kids. But we use the zones of regulation all the time. Each zone represents a different group of feelings, which are labeled on this slide for you. And it helps the children identify what they're feeling and kind of categorize those feelings into different colors. So if we're feeling angry, we're in the red zone. If we're feeling super silly, wiggly, nervous, any of those feelings that kind of make us like shaky like this, that's the yellow zone. If we're feeling happy, ready to go, we're feeling good, that's the green zone. And if we're more like slow moving, so any of those feelings like sad, tired, sick, that's the blue zone. And so it works to help us identify emotions and kind of categorize and recognize what our body is feeling in those different zones. And then part of the zones curriculum is each kid is developing their own strategies to support themselves for each zone. Now, I want everyone to be careful if they're using this, because a lot of times people will think the whole goal of zones is to get back to the green zone. We got to be in the green zone. We got to stay in the green zone. We got to be happy. That's the most important thing. That is not the case. The point of zones is to identify our feelings, know which zone we're in, and then identify the appropriate tools to use in that zone to keep our body safe and to work through those feelings. It is okay to be mad. It is okay to be sad. It's okay to be a little wiggly sometimes, totally fine. But how can we support ourselves in those moments? Sometimes I'll hear therapists say like, okay, we got to get back into the green zone. Why? Something really bad just happened to me. I don't need to be happy about it. I can feel mad feelings. I can be sad. But what are the ways that we can support ourselves in those moments? Let's see. I have some references. This whole thing will be recorded. And I also have my email address at the end of the slide. These are just some references I used for the PowerPoint, but I can also send. Natalie, is the PowerPoint itself going to be sent out or just the recording? Okay, the PowerPoint will be sent out too. So these links will be there. And then if you have like any further, like if you don't, we have time for questions right now, but if there are any questions that you maybe don't feel comfortable asking in a group setting, feel free to email me. Feel free to connect with your child's OT or social worker to discuss further if you have any like specific questions, but I would love to open the floor up to any questions that you guys have right now. Yeah, go ahead. Just jump right in. Totally fine.
So just a question in terms of like, in terms of like getting a child regulated after they're coming out of a meltdown. Once their meltdown is complete, they're still not in the green zone, but they're somewhere in like yellow zone. So it's kind of like a transition from like a red zone to a yellow
Mhm.
zone, but not yet in the green zone, if I may use those terms now.
Sure.
So my question is more in terms of, in those situations, what are your thoughts on like using screen time as a method of getting into a regulation? Like from that, do you think it increases their the brain functioning or whatever to go back into like a more stressful situation or like a sensory situation, or does it is it okay to use screen time as a help for them to come from like yellow to green?
Great question. So I have kind of like a nuanced answer to that, because I think that it depends on how you're using the screen time. I would advise against using it as like a distraction from the feelings, because sometimes, if you set your kid up with their tablet and they're watching a show, they're not really feeling or addressing the emotions that they're feeling. They're just kind of engrossed in the show, and they're just kind of not actively involved in the process of coming down from that meltdown. However, I would say that if you want to use screen time to do like, like a yoga video or a dance video or something where the child is able to get their body involved, and it's more of like an active engagement in the screen time, I think that would be like a super appropriate use. I would also advise against, and I don't think this is what you're suggesting, but I just want to make it be clear about it, that like after we come down from a meltdown, we get screen time. I would be hesitant to have that happen just so that association
No.
isn't made. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So
Yeah.
how they associate that, it might lead to sometimes them just having like a meltdown for the screen time, which probably makes it a tantrum in this case because you have an objective to get the screen time.
Yes. Yes. Very good. A plus.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What about, I don't know, this happens to me a lot, when the child has both a tantrum meltdown at the same time during like social gatherings, like family, like holidays, family gatherings, birthdays, all of that combined. Like an example would be like, it may start with a tantrum, like there's, for example, with my son, like he hates hearing the birthday song, and he knows it's coming, so the tantrum is already starting because he doesn't want the birthday song. But then everybody starts gathering and he gets overwhelmed, and then comes a meltdown, and then you're also in a closed setting, and then what do you do then when there's so many people around you? And
yeah, that's a great question. Some suggestions that I have is, and I don't know your son, so I don't know what you guys have tried in the past, but obviously like prepping for those situations, like if it is a birthday party, being able to practice that in like a more controlled setting where there's not like 40 unexpected people around us. So practicing that just in the spirit of like maintenance in the moment. A lot of times I'll tell parents to kind of have like almost like an escape plan or like a safety plan of like figuring out a safe place to go in those moments to kind of help the child self-advocate. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I don't want to sing the birthday song, providing them with the option to remove themselves from the situation before those big heightened feelings start coming. Being able to have kind of that option to have like a safe, almost like calm down space within those situations. I know sometimes that's not possible. Does your son use headphones ever?
Yeah, he does, but it's weird because like sometimes they help, sometimes it doesn't. So I feel like we try to find things that will help him during his meltdown or even for a tantrum, but I feel like it's not 100%. So sometimes I get surprised when it does not work and I don't know what to do next.
Yeah, and I would say from my experience too, that's also one of the things about meltdowns that can be extra challenging, is something that's going to work one time, you try it again the next time and it's just like not cutting it. And so it is like kind of a process of trial and error, and especially when you are in, a like social environment or you're out in the community when there's something you have so little control of your environment, like if you're at the park or the grocery store or the airport or something like that, where you literally like you can't control the hundreds of people around you. It makes it really hard. And so I would suggest that having like a variety of options, of having kind of like how old's your son?
4.
He's 4. Okay. Would he be able to kind of like work with you to make sort of like a safety plan for those moments and like come up with ideas to help him feel comfortable?
So usually like he will actually advocate for himself. So he'll like tell me like I need a break or stuff like that. But there have been situations where there is really either no time or place for a break.
Yeah.
And I know the meltdown's coming or it's about to happen. And it's happened even like in dinner parties, like a family dinner, like holiday party or something like that. It's like, and it's people that he knows, it's people that he sees. It's just like maybe he's having an off day.
Yep.
And so we try to have certain things for him, but there have been those moments where nothing works.
It's just
basically.
nothing. And you know, in those moments, sometimes like the more I really can't emphasize enough like the value of just like silence, like active silence.
Yeah.
Sitting there with him, being with him, letting him know that you're there and he's safe and it's going to be okay. But then if nothing else is going to work, that's pretty much all we can provide in that moment, is that sense of safety, that sense of comfort. Because anything else might just like escalate it more. Especially when we're trying like, okay, try this, now try that. Now let's go over here. Like, let's take 10 deep breaths. Sometimes we're beyond the point where that's okay, especially if it's in an overstimulating environment with many people. And so just being there and having that sort of active silence can help a lot. And, you know, sometimes time truly is, and it's like the most, I always kick myself when I tell parents this, because they're like, this is not what I want to hear, but like time really is sometimes the most magical thing when it comes to these meltdowns, is just giving some time.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Celeste.
I have a question. It's increasingly becoming harder, and I think it might be a unique situation, obviously, given that my kids are twins, Ines and Amelia, but Amelia, she's very strong-headed. She's very determined. She knows what she wants, and that's her personality. Her meltdowns are also very, 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 and you can tell very much tantrum versus meltdown. There are these situations though where I feel like she needs to very much control her environment in these meltdowns. And so she's she reacts very well to me, like assisting and emotionally regulating. So like I'll get down on the floor with her, I'll sit with her, validate all this stuff. If anybody comes into her bubble, especially Ines, it becomes very, very exemplified and it gets even worse. And so she now starts to control, like, for example, like, you know, she wouldn't let me pick her up to carry her, and she's having this meltdown, right? But then like Ines needs to be carried, so then I'm carrying Ines, and then Emmy like loses her mind. Or like if she needs her little like pacifier, which we're trying to wean, but she sees Ines has a pacifier too, like her next goal is to like get rid of any kind of soothing skills her twin has by like taking away her soothing skills. And so then Ines then now starts to get into this like meltdown. And anyways, it's just very targeted of like mom space. And I don't know how to control that, because she's becoming unsafe towards sister, but it's also just, I don't know, like trying to get Ines, if you will, to feel as shitty as she does without her even knowing it, because she's taking away that. I don't know if that made sense, but this is what I'm experiencing a lot lately in like them turning 2 years old. And it's
Yes.
Yeah.
So two very key things there. Twins are such a unique situation when it comes to these tantrum and meltdowns, and also they're 2. So they are in full toddler mode with their sassiness and their opinions, and they are their own people, especially because they're twins and they're they're carving out their own identities and they're like, I'm my own person and I'm going to show it to you in a big way. And so a lot of times, so a couple of things. A lot of times with siblings, especially twins, will try to encourage parents to have like specific carved out time with each child, like individually, like special like mommy and Inez time or special mommy and Emmy time, so that they are, because a lot of it does stem from like jealousy, and that can be the case, and it's totally age appropriate and totally developmentally appropriate to like for a toddler to be like, mommy, I don't want you to carry me, but also now you're carrying sister, like wait a second, I want that. So I also want to recognize that's very, very age and developmentally appropriate. But being able to provide them with some other opportunities for that, like that really intentional one-on-one time can be really, really helpful. And then I would also just recommend, like, if you guys all like practice together some of the like calming strategies, like, I don't know, I feel I've seen your kiddos around the academy, and I feel like doing like pretend play with feelings and just doing as much modeling as possible and having their toys take deep breaths, doing yoga with them, having all of these different strategies that you can then in the moment they'll feel familiar to them. So practicing them when they are regulated can be really helpful. So then in the moment they'll understand, like, I don't know if your kids have like a special toy that they like to hold on to or whatever, but like, oh, look, like Elmo's taking deep breaths. Like, let's take deep breaths with Elmo. Sometimes I find that like removing myself from the situation too, like not like Miss Claire's taking deep breaths. Let's take deep breaths. It's because then they're like, oh, I don't care what Miss Claire's doing, or like, I don't care what mom's doing, but like, oh, look, like Elmo's doing it. Let's do it with Elmo. That can be a fun way, especially for like the little ones. Toddler age is one of the hardest ages for emotional regulation because they are experimenting with boundaries and they're sassafras and they have big feelings. And that's, again, totally age appropriate. And so I want us to be careful in thinking that like the meltdowns are like excessive. However, using these strategies to be able to practice them can be really, really helpful in just like ingraining it more in the situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I think so.
Yes, Katrina.
Yeah, any tools or ideas when a meltdown leads to a child running away? My daughter's a little older, she's 6, but sometimes we've seen with big emotions recently, like if she's having these moments, she'll like run up to her room and say, I don't want anybody to look at me. I don't want anybody to see me. So it's troublesome there, but then in others can also become problematic because it's dangerous. If she runs away at a playground or, every morning when we have to transition from being on the playground to going into the classroom, she'll run away and just kind of freeze up on some playground equipment and
not move.
Yeah, and not want to come, not want to move,
and that's where we are.
and then I get dysregulated, and I'm just like, okay, take a deep breath. But
yes.
Yeah, so ideas on that.
And
yeah,
also,
so
sorry, can I just add, Katrina, I just wanted to add super quick, because actually I was gonna say that's like Inez too. And then I'm like in that moment, I think like she's running away from her safe person, and it's like going against like what another kid may do. And I feel like it's like, I'm your safe person and you're running away from me. And it's like I agree. I just wanted to add like how you feel can get dysregulated, because it's like all of a sudden it's like they want nothing to do with you too. So it's like, I get that running away is a very strange feeling as a parent.
Yes, that's a good point too. And I think, Katrina, you had the great point of like, okay, first step, regulate myself. Because if I'm going to go into this situation, I got to do it with like a clear head, and I got to do it without losing my cool too. So that's step one. And especially Celeste, to your point, being able to also remind yourself that like, okay, my child is in a heightened emotional state right now. She's not running away from me because I did something wrong or because she hates me or whatever. Just remembering like heightened emotions and from all people right now. Let's regroup and let's figure out what we can do to support within this context. Katrina, I'm wondering if like, so it sounds like her room is like her safe place at home. I'm wondering if like before going places with her, like the park or whatever, if you can identify like a safe place for her to run to from the get-go, where like, okay, if you get upset, like let's run to like the secret cave or whatever, where you can have a moment of quiet, like one of the places like under the playground or whatever. Or if she's at school, if she can identify a spot in the classroom, I don't know if they have a spot where she can go, like a cozy corner or something like that, and that could be like her safe spot. Just adding a little bit of preparation before going to, I know it's not perfect and there's not always going to be like that spot, but kind of deciding together as a team of like, okay, like what's going to be our safe spot, or like what's going to be our calm, cozy spot for today.
Okay, that's a new idea, so that'll be helpful for us to because
Awesome.
we talk about it. We talk about, you know, when the teacher comes out, it's time to
Mhm.
line up, and it's
Yep.
like, despite that, I know she's feeling big emotions. She's having
Yes.
troubles in school, and so it's like they overtake whatever sensibility we've talked about. So I like that idea.
Awesome. And we have about 5 more minutes. I did see something in the chat that just came to me that I will answer about challenges with transitions and like meltdowns kind of amping up during transitions, which comes off right exactly what you said, Katrina. And again, I think like that preparation is really, really key. Using something like a visual schedule, using a visual timer. I often have in my sessions have literally just like a piece of scrap paper with me, and I will draw up really ugly stick figures of what's happening first, then next, just to give that added support and preparation of like, this is what's happening next. Like, we're going to do this game, and then we're going to go to the gym, and then the gym's going to be all done, and then we're going to do a craft, and then we're going to go home, so that they can really see that progression and there's no surprises there. Some kids love a visual timer. Just pulling up your phone with like that iPhone timer. Some kids hate a visual timer because it stresses them out to see time going by. For me, I hate that, stresses me out. But for some kids, they love that. They can see exactly how much time is left of something. It gives them that sense of comfort. And so different things like that can kind of help you experiment in terms of transitions. I want to make sure that we're mindful of time, but I wanted to thank everyone so much for taking the time out of their Wednesday to join us. I had a lot of fun, and I hope that you guys all got at least something out of it. And please feel free to email me, email your child's OT or social worker or whoever is on their team to ask any more questions that you might have if something pops up.
Thank you again for
Thank you,
attending today. Our next one in the start of February, we're going to be having a feeding series, which is going to be really exciting, with our feeding team joining us to talk about different topics. You can sign up for one, you can sign up for all, whatever is your choice. All of them, will make sure that we have a recording, so that you're my guinea pig. So I hope that this recording went well, so I can send it out. If it won't, or didn't work out, I'll make sure that I connect with Claire to figure out how to, get a recording to you guys. We'll always send the slides and things like that with contact information if you have questions. In March, we have the IEP series. I will be delivering that because we have several kids that are coming up for transitioning out of the academy, which is super excited. But I want to make sure that parents understand what their rights are, what they can advocate for, and what an IEP and a 504 is, because those are like brand new terms for a lot of us. And we're happy to kind of help support in that process. And then in the future, we'll be doing a totality training as well as behavior management. And then another family just connected me with a lawyer to talk about special education trust funds and things like that for, you know, how to set up for the future. I know your kids are little, you know, 4 and 5, and that's not really on your radar of thinking about like what happens in the, you know, way off future. But obviously we want to make sure that you guys have enough information to take care of your kids as we all get older. If you guys have topics of interest, I want to make sure that we offer this throughout the year. So everybody should have received information, links to sign up for all of these. If you did, oh, my watch just told me it's not sure it understands. If you need a link to, or you need a sign up link for anything, feeding, IEP, anything like that, just email me back from that email that I gave out with the sign up, and I'll make sure that I send it to you so that you guys can all have it for the next one. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us. This is a real good start to our parenting series, and we hope to see you again in February, which is next week. All right. Have a good one.